Okay, this is your host, Cool Al, and I'm here with my co host, Maria. And we're going to run through self made episodes two, three, four. We might even recap some of episode one. And the goal is to keep it under 20 minutes. So without any further ado, let's jump right in. So, in chronological order, like from episode one, is there anything that you could remember, like if we're trying to retell the story? Um, what stood out from episode one for you?
Episode one. The thing that stood out is just her, Madam C.J. Walker's purpose for wanting to use the product and sell the product, and Addie. I guess that was sort of what stood out for me is her relationship with Addie and how Addie did not want her to sell Addie's products, and so that prompted Madam C.J. Walker to develop her own products so that she could, sell them and promote them and all that. So that's the thing that stood out for me from episode one.
Let me see if I could recount some of the things that stood out for me in episode one. I don't think it has always been so well documented that, like, her hair had been falling out, and so that prompted her to want to remedy that. I also like that the lady Addie came to her, as a friend, was very concerned with her. She had just been abused by her husband and was bleeding, and Addie was there and very supportive and stuff. Um, and then how that later manifested in one of the most negative ways. Yeah, that stood out for me in episode one. Um, the role of the men, also the roles of the men involved in this series was very interesting to me. A lot of them seemed like they had a lot of Robin-esque qualities as compared to Batman, because Madam C.J. Walker definitely was Batman. And I'm okay with that. I don't think that a leader should be determined by sex. I think it should be determined by the most qualified. You know, it also made me realize that we need to see more films of successful black businessmen. And I had touched on this before when we reviewed episode one. There's not many out there. I thought of The Pursuit of Happiness, but I also realized why I didn't think of The Pursuit of Happiness is because all through the movie, it was showing his struggles to overcome and to get to a goal. And then, like, as the movie was ending, it said he goes on to be a successful, businessman. Da, da, da. But we need to see a movie almost from beginning to end that presents somebody making some raw power moves, in the business spectrum. And we don't need them to be a drug dealer. We don't need them to be involved in sports or entertainment, you know. And it's fine if you are, like, get that money, you know what I'm saying? Not opposed. But okay, so I'm going too far away. But yeah, I just wanted to try to recount some of the things. Oh, and Madam C.J. Walker in episode one was trying to get women together and unite them, and that seemed like such a noble thing to do. You know what I mean, and to help them grow out their hair, because hair is connected to beauty and self-esteem. I thought that was a pretty hot idea. So she presented herself as a champion of the race. I also like the convention that they use with boxing, and so some of the critics are not fans. And I've heard some harsh criticism of almost every aspect of this show. And I want to say, I wish people could fall back a little bit and breathe easy and understand, an artist has a right to use some poetic license to present, whatever picture that they want to paint. Like, everything doesn't have to be factual down to the, last detail. It's not a documentary. It's more like a dramatic based on the life. And I think that an artist is entitled to their interpretation of, of history, of a time, of a period, and they can highlight or minimize things. They could even change characters as long as it pushes the plot forward and it doesn't, change the story altogether. The fight convention I think was very interesting, and the reason I say that is because um, sports represents in the black race, an opportunity. Like, I always talk about sports and entertainment. Those seem like the only time the playing field is level. And like I said, there's biases even in that, but it's the most level that uh, black American or black can hope for. You know what I'm saying? Unfortunately. And so it's no wonder why we excel in those levels. And at that time, the country was dealing with their first black heavyweight champion, Jack Johnson, and it was set up like a battle between her and this lady Addie. So I get it, and if other people don't get it, that's okay too. I'm just saying, just try to refrain from a harsh criticism of a show if you don't really understand the nuances. And, most of the things that people trashed, I looked at, the way that it impacted me was like, wow, I understand it. I see it totally different and I get it. You know what I'm saying? I'm not afraid to see a woman in a leadership position. I mean, I think this country has shown time and time again that it has problems with strong women. We saw that with Hillary Clinton, and this is why we got Agent Orange now, running around like he's the king of the world. And these people's harshest critics, a lot of times, sadly to say, is other women. We saw that with Hillary. We see that with the show. And I don't know what that is about. In my personal life, I've been raised by strong, sometimes overbearing and overwhelming black women. And I noticed that, when I look for a woman that I'm going to be spending the rest of my life with, I have to be respected pretty much as an equal. I don't like being patronized. I don't like it when somebody is condescending towards me. I can't, I don't accept that in my relationships. I don't accept that on the job when there's other males. You're going to have to respect me. And if you can't, then we can't work together, But I have no problem with a strong, intelligent leader, holding down that number one position. You know what I'm saying? As long as they can respect me in my role and my position, we're good. If they can't, then I got to be out. So I have no problems with what they presented in the business decision this strong black woman made. And she was a leader. And sometimes I think she felt she was the best qualified to lead. And I would have to say, from what I know about her and from what was presented, she was. Let's move on to episode number 2, because the time is running out. Episode 2. What are some of the things that you remember from episode 2?
Oh gosh, for reviewing everything, I can't remember episode 2 specifically. Maybe you can help me out a little bit.
In episode 2, they presented Booker T. Washington.
Okay.
And she really, so these men had kind of closed the door to an opportunity to Madam C.J. Walker. So all of y'all who, criticize her as being like Queen Bee, I won't spell out the rest of it, understand that her voice and her position wasn't really respected by the men at that time. So she had to fight and claw her way up to be respected and, to be heard. Because I think, the men of that time felt like that wasn't a woman's place. But who are we to determine a woman's place? You know what I mean? So I look at it as checks and balances, So she had to fight and claw her way up to be heard, to be respected, and she did that. She did that. So I don't look at it on the other end, like, when she got to the top, she was so heavy-handed and didn't respect men. I mean, maybe that was the case. But as of what was presented, like I said, I saw her as a strong leader. I saw her as the most qualified to lead and let the chips fall where they may. I agree with what the white guy Rockefeller said. Listen, you didn't get to be, top dog, by being soft. So if they don't agree with you, fire them. You know what I mean? Which brings me to another point. Business is business. It's not personal. And I know people say, well, capitalism sometimes is the root of all evil. Guns are bad. Well, it's just like Malcolm X said, you know what I'm saying? As it pertains to violence, he's like, when I get attacked, by racist members of society, like groups like the Klan, if I defend myself, I don't call that violence. I call it intelligence. You know what I'm saying? So my analogy and my metaphor right now is that, yes, a lot of the tools that our oppressor have used are very evil. But if we can grab hold of those tools and use them to acquire our freedom, I think it would be silly not to. Um, and so, capitalism isn't the end all be all, but for those who are living in this American context or wherever they live, and they want to apply those cutthroat practices in order to obtain their freedom, do it by all means, and help the people with in any way you can. That's just what I wanted to throw out there.
Yeah. Well, related to businesses, not personal. I liked how at the end of the series she had gotten a contract or a deal with the drugstore to put her products in the drugstore, which would have been extremely, beneficial for her, would have made a lot of money. And then the saleswomen that worked for her they didn't want that because it would take their jobs away. And she thought about it and she decided to support them and not do what was probably going to make her even more money. Right. So I like the fact that she pulled out of that drugstore deal. And so, even though business is not personal, I like the fact that she was obviously cared. And
right.
So that was,
Right. Yeah. I do think that when we use other people's tools to obtain our freedom, we always find a way to put our spin on it. So that's why I would say, I'm pro using those tools if necessary, because I know our roots and our culture. And at the end of the day, like, we think about the many and not just the one. And so I'd rather somebody be in a position to use those tools to our advantage than not. Going back to episode 2 and Booker T. Washington, a lot of times Booker T. Washington is portrayed in our history as the great compromiser, as if he was a sellout. And, because he just wanted to work in conjunction with white people. He didn't want to necessarily be all buddy and up under them, but, he represented where Black people were coming out of slavery, and he spoke to what was best for the masses. And a lot of people thought that he did a lot of how can I say, like he subjected himself to the rule and the authority of white people, and he just compromised and didn't want any problem. Well, I look at it a little bit different. I think that he came up with a very practical approach as to what and how to help the masses. And all of us at that point in time weren't educated, and we couldn't represent the talented 10. You know what I'm saying? Which W.E.B. Du Bois spoke to, which some consider elitist, but sometimes the talented 10th really agree with W.E.B. Du Bois's philosophy. But other people who look at it can really be critical and realize that it was elitist and that it was setting themselves up for failure because they would have to depend on a small select few of elites for their salvation. At least with Booker T, the masses, came out of slavery with skills that would help to like they knew how to farm the land. They were forced into doing it for years. So if they could get paid for their services and turn that into a trade, then they could probably survive. Like all I'm saying is that when you look at the big picture, it wasn't so bad. And also in his private life, you know what I'm saying, he wasn't against education. He started a school. You know what I mean? That is still Tuskegee is still present now. W.E.B. Du Bois, you know, he did a lot of great things for our people, but he was, you know, kind of snobbish. Kind of like how Addie was. But it's funny how in the show he related more to Madam C.J. Walker and Booker T didn't. You know, I wish it had been the other way around because in my vision of Booker T, he was more for the people than W.E.B. Du Bois was. Not to take anything away from Du Bois, I think that he definitely wanted to help our people. I just don't necessarily agree with his method as much as I do Booker T's. It's like Martin Luther King. Like I can't be against Martin Luther King, but I prefer Malcolm X more.
But when it came to women, I think Booker T wasn't as progressive. That's how I don't know if that's true, but that's how the show portrayed.
Right, and if that's the case in real history, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that's what my understanding was that's how it was in real history. When I was hearing one of the great-great-grandchildren talking about Booker T, they said that he was not at all, he didn't believe that she really had any voice or he wasn't supportive of her. I don't know. Yeah, that's what I'd heard was factual. Historically, he just wasn't.
Well, that would have been a point of contention if I had lived in that time with Booker T. I mean, I like him, what I know about him historically, but that I don't agree with, you know.
Although that was probably more common. I mean, that viewpoint that Booker T had, because there were all the businessmen that were, I think they were invited to the house when the factory burned or when the house burned, and they were being asked to be investors. And there were a good 8 to 9 men there, and not any. They all walked away. They weren't willing to invest because they saw that Madam C.J. Walker was sort of in charge, and her husband was there, but it was clear that it was really her company, and I think they were not comfortable with the woman basically being in charge of the company. So I think it probably was a very common philosophy that women really didn't have any place doing that.
Right.
So, you know, it probably was just what most people thought, most people thought during those times, and women too, maybe. And they didn't really talk about women and how they felt about women in business, other than the women who worked for her were very happy that.
Okay. Something else I wanted to touch upon is like, you know, they alluded to Madam C.J.'s Walker, her daughter having like it seemed to be like a budding lesbian romance, and as the series progressed, like it, you know, that's basically how it turned out. And Madam C.J. Walker was okay with it in the end and made her peace with it. And you know, that's one of the knocks and criticisms on the show is that people are pushing this gay agenda way too much in the media. And, you know, growing up, I grew up in a Black community, and the quote unquote gay agenda was not tolerated. And to this day, there's still the least amount of tolerance in the Black community. And, you know, I feel that I've made some progressive steps in that direction, because at one point in my life, there was nothing you could tell me about it that I would support. You know, now I'm heterosexual to the day I die, but I've also come to have friends who are in that community, friends and family members who are in that community. And I've become more understanding. I've listened to a lot of their points of view. We don't always agree, but I don't think it's so much that the media is trying to push a gay agenda. I'm not going to say that they're not, but even without their push, gay people are a reality in our society. So we got to get used to it, just like white people had to get used to black people, being their neighbors, being their co-workers. I'm not one to equate the two struggles. I think they're very different, but there may be a few overlaps. And, I'm not trying to hype those overlaps up, but it is what it is.
Right. And if it was, and I haven't researched whether it's historically accurate, I'm guessing that it was, that her daughter was.
I listened to somebody do a review, and they did say it was pretty accurate.
Pretty accurate, okay. Mm-hmm. And I liked her support. I mean, at first, her mom, Madam C.J. Walker, just wanted to find her a husband and an heir, mm-hmm. and then at the end, she realized how unhappy her daughter was.
Right.
So I liked the fact that it was a strong mother-daughter bond, and there was, it was more about love. But I really liked that, that they showed that her support of her daughter. So.
Yeah, like in my family, there were people who either suffer from being an alcoholic or a drug addict. I'm not going to call any names, but there was one central figure in my family who supported the people with these issues no matter what and loved them wholeheartedly no matter what. Mm-hmm. And that's what I look for in a family, mm-hmm. is when, regardless of what issue you have or whatever problem you have, don't be so critical and condescending. You can be correcting, and you can be helpful, and you can be supportive. I think that those are the best way to mm-hmm. combat those evils. When how can I say, like, by calling a person name or not showing them love and showing them all of this hate, that is not helpful in the least. And it's almost like you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And a lot of people, when they try to help somebody, a friend or family member, they become more a part of the problem than they are the solution. And I don't agree with that tactic. But we're running out of time, so let's see if we can, because as far as I know, we're only up to episode 2, so we got to breeze mm-hmm. through in that next 3 minutes, mm-hmm. Episodes 3 and 4. I think we already touched on a mm-hmm. lot of episode 4 because we talked about the Rockefeller situation, and we talked about how she actually worked it out with the ladies who were saleswomen for her company, where she didn't put her product in the major drugstores. They felt mm-hmm. that would eliminate their jobs. And right. so when she thought about it, she was given advice by Rockefeller. She, considered what was best for the many mm-hmm. and her all-woman army. Mm-hmm. Let's see. I like how sweetness was portrayed, and even though he was a character that lived in the black underground, he still was helpful in any way that he mm-hmm. could towards Madam C.J. Walker's business. And mm-hmm. also, I like how they presented him, even though he was mm-hmm. like a thug, he died as a hero trying to protect mm-hmm. his cousin's son that he had a big fight with. So go figure. Right. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Let's see, episode 3. Oh, she met W.E.B. Du Bois in episode mm-hmm. 3, and I think he reappeared again maybe in episode 4. And, he definitely was a fan of hers and a supporter. So that was nice to see, even though I'm not the biggest fan of W.E.B. Du Bois. Mm-hmm. But, like I said, how can you not like Martin Luther King, even though I like Malcolm X better? I like Booker T better, but it's not like I can't like W.E.B. Du Bois. Mm-hmm. I just hope that I never, no matter how successful I become in life, become a total elitist. You know, I always want to be the voice of the people, kind of like how Madam C.J. Walker was presented. This is all we have time for. If we need to have an addendum, we will create one, but we ran out of time, and I hope that you'll go check the series out for yourself and think about these issues that we have talked about critically and decide for yourself where you stand. I know where I stand, and I'm sure Maria knows where she stands. But yeah, I better not hear anybody talking bad about Madam C.J. Walker. That's all I want. Oh, I got to mention before we leave, though, she did steal Addie's formula. You know what I mean? But like she said, she made it better. And I already really addressed this when I said, you know, we use the oppressor's tools to seek out our freedom. And sometimes we do some of the things that the oppressor would do. But if you want to criticize Madam C.J. Walker, won't you criticize Agent Orange? You know what I'm saying? Or any other businessman in this country that was successful, you know what I mean? With the same, you know, come at them with the same energy. You know what I mean? Don't look at a woman who does some of the same things as men. It's like she's the root of all evil. You know what I'm saying? The same way you could accept Trump for being, you know, this supposed successful business tycoon. You know what I mean? Look at Madam C.J. Walker or the Hillary Clintons in that same light. You know, when they play the political game, when they engage in business, come at them with the same energy as you come at their male counterparts. Don't make them like the Antichrist because they do some of the same things as the men that you worship do. All right. On that note, we definitely out of time. Peace.